Hi, Professor Steiner here again, and what I'd like to discuss today is the fact that you can learn to defend yourself very, very adequately without going as far as obtaining a black belt. Now, in American Combato, we have a curriculum that's very comprehensive, very inclusive of tremendous variety of practical techniques. But even then, it's fewer techniques than you'd find in almost any martial arts system because you don't need a great number of techniques. You need quality, not quantity. And if you're looking to be able to defend yourself, one thing you should understand, a handful of good techniques, thoroughly mastered, is what will enable you to defend yourself, coupled with mindset. And this is critical. I've known black belts whose mindset was completely inappropriate to actual close combat. In some cases, they were competitors and it really didn't matter that much. In other instances, they were people who were studying self-defense and they were training in systems where there were an enormous number of techniques being taught. And they were led to believe that they needed to learn all of these techniques and get to black belt level before they could be sure of being able to handle most situations, and that's just not true. If you have mastered, underline the word mastered 20 times. If you have mastered the low side kick to the knee, the front kick to the testicles, the hand axe chop, the chin jab, the tiger's claw thrust, the ear box, the knee to the testicles. And if you have developed perhaps 5 or 6 effective combinations, attacking combinations, where you put those together and can do them fluidly and fast with power, accuracy, speed, balance, and follow-up, and if you develop really just a couple of dozen generalized types of reaction to street attacks, counterattacks that are adaptable, and all of those that we teach in American Combato are, if you notice the instructional lesson by Professor Bryans in the counter to the front choke, the lesson that he provides there. Well, that action that he teaches against a front choke is equally adaptable to a two-hand lapel grab, a one-hand lapel grab, a push, a reach, and so on. It could be used in a number of situations. It can even be used, as I show my students, against wrist grabs. Now, you're learning it for a particular context or in a particular context, but it's adaptable. Now, providing you're learning self-defense techniques like that, or counterattacks as I prefer to call them, like that, you don't need a tremendous number to be able to defend yourself. Remember, you want to focus on a preemptive self-defense capability. That is, you don't want to rely on a large number of reactive or self-defense techniques. You want to rely on a small number, and you don't want to rely on them first. As soon as you acquire the preemptive mindset, as soon as you get the message that what you need when you're under attack is extreme offense, and as soon as you learn that you apply that extreme offense preemptively, as soon as you realize you're under attack, you're going to be well able to defend yourself, because you're not going to give the attacker a chance to gain the upper hand. You'll go after him the second you realize he's after you. Now, there are instances, of course, when you can be taken by surprise, and you do need counterattacking movements for them, but you don't need a lot. You need a handful. There are way, way too many self-defense, in quotes, self-defense techniques taught in self-defense systems. You don't need 20 different defenses against a wrist grab. Not at all. You need to be able to attack a man who's grabbed you in a wrist grab, and the problem's solved. For self-confidence, it's a good idea to know how to break a wrist hold, go through the thumb, and so on. But in a serious situation, if you're a young lady and a guy grabs your arm, jam him in the eyes and break his leg. Don't just pull your hand free. When you undertake the study of self-defense, if you are studying for self-defense, there are certain things you want to avoid that clutter up the curriculum. And I do not intend this next comment as disrespect toward classical systems in the least. I respect all of them, and I respect the people who practice them. But you can dispense with the classical type of kata. In the Korean systems, they're called hyung. In the Chinese systems, they're referred to as forms or sets. Bruce Lee was quite correct in pointing out that they are not teaching you to defend yourself. The late John Blooming, a fantastic martial arts master, perhaps one of the greatest in the West, pointed that out too. Now, there's nothing wrong with practicing those things, but you don't need them. And when you dispense with the classical kata, you eliminate a good deal of material that you don't need for self-defense. Dispense with the classical traditional blocks. For heaven's sake, if you look at the sparring matches that are done in schools or contests, when do you see blocking done? When do you see people use a knife hand block, a rising block, a forearm block, a double arm block, a downward block? You don't. And you don't see people applying them with any degree of effectiveness in a real emergency. So that can be dispensed with. An emphasis on ground fighting. Every combat instructor, then and now, has recognized that going to the ground is undesirable and to be avoided in close combat. I've written tons of material explaining why. There have been other instructors who have emphasized the same thing. I'm not going to get into a debate with anybody on the subject. If you want to do it, go ahead and do it. The fact of the matter is, if you dispense with it, focus on preemptive attacking. First, get yourself a series of basic destructive blows. Cultivate combinations. So when you attack, it's in a barrage. You go after the man hard. And learn the general core concepts of dealing with attacks so that when you develop a counterattacking movement, it's not limited to one specific context. So you have thousands of self-defense techniques. You'll never be able to pick the right one in an emergency anyway if you learn thousands of techniques. Things happen too quickly. Learn general basic skills, learn to apply them aggressively, and develop an aggressive mindset. With these things operating on your behalf, you should be able to defend yourself very well and very quickly. One of the problems with decent people, like I am assuming most of you are, is that you are reluctant to be aggressive and destructive and ruthless. In a way, that's good, but for self-defense, that's very bad. The more ruthless and aggressive you are, the more you dispense with mercy and compassion and a sense of fairness or ethics, the more willing you are to pick up a bottle and smash it across someone's face, or shove any object at hand into his face and then break his leg with a kick, just to be as ruthless and aggressive as possible. Anything goes. When you cultivate that attitude, when you cultivate that mindset, when you have that behind your basic skills, then you've really got something that you can use in self-defense. Nobody requires complicated moves. Even experts who are forced to defend themselves, masters, don't use anything complicated. I remember back in the early 1960s, the fantastic Taekwondo master Richard Chun was attacked when he was a graduate student at New York University. He was in a cafeteria with a friend of his, and 8 punks entered the cafeteria, and they targeted Chun and his friend, I guess because they were very small. Richard Chun is really no taller than my wife. He's a fairly small man, size-wise. And they started up with him. Well, he hospitalized 6 of those punks. 2 of them ran away. In an interview subsequent to that experience, Chun was questioned about the techniques he used. And he said, I don't remember exactly except for a few. I used a reverse punch, back fist, elbow. He just mentioned a few basic blows. Because that's what you use under stress. You master core techniques, destructive techniques. Don't worry about going for black belt if that's not your interest. And you'll be able to defend yourself with the right attitude and those techniques properly done.